Hello, everyone. This is Alexander Horat with the Free American Press. Today, we're going to be talking to my good friend Jeffrey Matt. He is a researcher who's been researching many important topics, including how there may be possible side effects to the serum that they created, which the United States government now wants to give to every man, woman, and child across the entire nation. So, today, Jeffrey is going to be doing a presentation on that topic. Hello, Jeffrey. Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on, Alexander. I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that the listenership will benefit from my opinion about this whole topic. So I have a presentation I'm going to begin here, and it's about COVID-19. And COVID-19, the best way I could describe it in my words, in my opinion, is it's the never-ending story. And even in the actual movie, The Never-Ending Story, they promoted the injection as well. So it's just a brief moment in the whole film. Very few people probably catch this, but here it is. And so it's a very deeply embedded psychological uh, mindset that's been subconsciously embedded into movies, into TV, and all this that to promote injections. And I'm assuming there are some benefits, health benefits, evidence-based scientific benefits to the technology. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to be going over some of the what's happening apparently in the news. I didn't write any of these articles. This is just my story. It's my opinion, and the facts and everything are up for you to research and to confirm on your own. I don't present the truth. I present what I see and what I've been able to put together. So as this never-ending story of COVID-19 keeps going, we need to look at one of the main players. And so for those people, I would say, who is Anthony Fauci? Now, almost everybody on earth is aware of Dr. Fauci, and he is, from what I understand, involved with Jesuits. Now, is he lifelong Jesuit priest, or is he just a man who went and got a Jesuit education? And this Jesuit education that helped build him up over the years, and he has an incredible presence and power on earth. Uh, Here's just a simple example of what he's saying here. He says, when I went to the medical school, I was as much a humanitarian as I was a scientist, and that has had a major impact on the direction of my career in medicine, science, and public health. So he's really confirming here that it's his Jesuit education that took place a big role in his life, and so this whole COVID-19 thing is actually connected to a solar cult, and he's received awards, and I'll go into the solar cult later. Today is just more about COVID-19. But for those people who have listened to other of my presentations, know that I've discussed the solar cult many, many times, and it's the cult of two suns. But here's Dr. Fauci receiving some awards, and George Bush is probably one of the most informed men on earth, so he understands this too. And Dr. Fauci has received different awards throughout his lifetime. Here in 2021, by the Interfaith Youth Corps, he's the Humanist of the Year in 2021. And he's always on the news, and he's talking about different things, including the Delta variant and masks and other face coverings. And so that's something that I found that he's just dominating the airwaves. He's also made some interesting comments here where he says, "I don't think we should shake hands ever again." I find that a very fascinating statement for a doctor to say to the entire world, as basically something to operate with from now on for the rest of human history, until the Earth basically continues to be. Um, but a lot of people really appreciate him and really want to learn from him and listen to him, and they just go for everything he says, to the point where they love him so much they even created a Fauci ouchie pouchy, and you can put your injection card in this pouch, and so you can have Dr. Fauci with you, at every step of each injection. And but in reality, Dr. Fauci is involved not just as a political speaker or in medicine, but he's directly involved with patents. So for those people who appreciate this presentation, You can go look at all the types of patents that he's involved with. And it seems as if one of the components that it seems to reemerge a lot is HIV. So for those people, if you get the presentation, you can pause it at your own leisure and investigate and research and confirm, double check all this stuff yourself. Again, this is just my opinion. So, and it's not designed to contradict anybody else's official statement. It's not designed to contradict in any way. It's designed to just be a story. And it's very plausible that Dr. Fauci knows something that you don't, because he warned in 2017 of a surprise outbreak during the Trump administration. And so he did. And Trump, after the whole thing was rolled out, says he's the father of the vaccine and so on and so forth. And then he took the injection. And that injection was taken. And I wonder, because after everything I was looking at, I feel as if he was tricked into this whole thing, because he has made decisions that I'm grateful for. He's very, very capable, competent man. But I've never met anybody who's infallible. But I have a feeling he was unfortunately tricked into this whole thing. And we're going to have to pay the price for it, unfortunately. But we can take ownership by self-education, and then we can take action to work around it and change the outcome of what I suspect is coming. So, and regardless of what your opinion is of Mr. Trump, that's not really why I'm doing this. It's just to let you know that that's just my take. So, are you really surprised that they did a public exercise of a pandemic that is almost a perfect match to our COVID-19 crisis? And here is a website that has an event called Event 201. And it's basically a Johns Hopkins Center for Health and Security partnership with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation of Event 201. Excuse me, on October 18th, 2019. And so you're saying, well, what is this Event 201? Well, if you are unfamiliar with it, I highly recommend you go to their website and you check it out. And you can see that the people behind it are those three at the bottom. And here's another article saying that Gates Foundation is a longtime partner of the Chinese Communist Group, which funded military-linked coronavirus research at a Wuhan lab. So I wonder what that's all about, because I'm learning as I go, right? I'm just like everybody else. I'm no better or superior. I'm just looking as I go. And so this must be the location that they're talking about in Wuhan. So here are the websites. And let's take a closer look at, moving forward, let's take a look at the CDC, because that's where we're at here in North America. And they seem to be the big daddy here. And so when I try to understand, what is the CDC? Is it a nonprofit? Is it just an institution that's there on paper as part of the government to help the American people and the world, to help us, not better deal with any kind of infections? And I ended up finding out that it's actually just a corporation. And so corporations, in my mind, is for profit. It has nothing to do with philanthropy. It has nothing to do with helping people. It's about making the big bucks. They want that cheddar. So you want to get some cheddar, you get a corporation to make the cash. And so here's just an example of what I'm was wondering, is the CDC actually a corporation? And it is. So there's the information. And just as out of curiosity, hopefully everybody could see it. Do you see the sun rays, or the symbolic image of sun rays in the actual logo itself? And so there's an example of it. Here's another, and here's another. Here's another. Excuse me. And here's their website that's talking about the historical injection safety concerns. And from 1955 to 1963, this is concerning, an estimated 10 to 30% of polio injections administered in the U.S. were contaminated with simian virus SV40. Unfortunately, SV40 causes cancer. So that's a very poor record. Let's see how they dealt with COVID. Well, here's the former director of the CDC and something that was on the internet that I came across. And in this little interview, he was looking at where the origins of all this stuff came from. I didn't. He's talking about it. I'm just, going to the mainstream media to learn. And in that interview, he was looking at different possible sources, but he says in this interview, he says that 52 seconds, he says, but there was total lack of openness to pursue both hypotheses. And so whatever the mainstream says, that's what it is. There is no alternative. So that's basically what I drew from all of this. And so the new director, she is doing her job, and there's a symbolism of sun rays in the background as she's doing her presentation. And so that's just an interesting side note. And here's another example of sun symbolism, because again, this is a solar cult that's behind this whole thing. But it's just an example of it, so you can see what I mean. The yellow circle at the top has a symbolic representation of the sun. And so if I'm going to go back to their website here, and you can see that they have this area on their website called Selected Adverse Events Reported After the COVID-19 Injections. And if you look a little bit closer at that, it says near the bottom, it says what you need to know. COVID-19 injections are safe and effective. So here it is a little bit blown up so you can see what I'm talking about. And so if there was an issue, you can go report it on this website, which is a government website. And there's even publications on the CDC's website that help you understand about articles about any problems related to the injection. So you can go look that up yourself. This goes on for pages and pages. I'm not going to put everybody to sleep with this. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about and you want a little bit extra help, well, you could always go to their YouTube site, and it helps you show you how to use their tool in case that occurs, which I hope nobody gets hurt. I hope nobody is injured. And I hope nobody passes away in any way, regardless if it's directly or indirectly from it. Yeah, and so here's another institute called the Salk Institute. So some people who know her in this realm, I wasn't, so I became aware. I noticed that they're using sun symbolism again. You can see the sun rays hitting the side of the wall there. It's how the novel coronavirus spike protein plays additional key role in illness. And Salk researchers and collaborators show how the protein damages cells, confirming COVID-19 is a primarily vascular disease. So I didn't write that. The Salk Institute did. And so here, one of the big daddies of the Salk Institute, I think he's part of the solar cult because they went out of their way to get a professional photographer, not at $2 an hour, not at minimum wage. They got Big Daddy, big cash to do this the right way so that the people at the very top understand that this is their game. And Jordan Maxwell, he talked about the sun rising from the mountains of the east between two mountains. And he has a whole presentation where he explains all this, not the COVID stuff, but the sunrise, the solar cult. And so this is an example of what Jordan's 60-year commitment and 60 years of tireless constitution of sticking with it and, being a master teacher. And so because of his extraordinary sacrifice, lifelong sacrifice, I was able to learn from the master amongst many, many others, not just Jordan, many, many others. But I just want to make a special note to him, because if it wasn't for him in my personal life, I wouldn't have been able to discern all this symbolism without his hard work and attention to detail. So is it safe and effective? Well, let's take a closer look. Here's a scientific publication saying that the COVID-19 RNA injections and the risk of prion disease, some people will say it could be correlating with the possibility of the equivalent to the human mad cow. So that's a very tragic situation. I don't know how it plays out, but just to inform the listener that this exists and you can decide yourself if it's safe and effective as they've claimed. I'm not making any claim. I'm just saying that this is what I came across. Here's another article that seems to talk about this kind of material. Here's another one. Here's the Memorial Sloan Kettering. Now, a lot of people, they're going to say, a lot of these pictures, it's not the official, it's not official, you're not official enough. Well, this is one of the most prestigious places on earth for this kind of scientific research. And it does discuss mRNA and how it could be correlated or directly connected to cancer for those people who choose to take the injection. And don't worry about it, because they know what they're doing, and if they need to, they can just change the shelf life date and just, because it's safe and effective. Just like if you get food at the store, if you can just, the guy at the store can just change the expiration date and everything's just fine. Most people would not be okay with that, but because we're being told it's safe and effective, they can do this, and there's no chance of any risk of any kind whatsoever. And of course, the system, the mainstream system, including the Catholic Church, the Vatican, they believe the same thing. They think that vaccines, injections save lives. And so here's an article I found of an alternative website, but it's actually based off of a research paper by a gentleman named Steve Kirsch. I think this man is very competent, very informed, and so I invite those who are interested to research this gentleman's work. Okay? And so people will say, well, it's not official enough. I want something that's so rock solid that, I can go to the bank with it. Well, here's an example that's rock solid. The FDA itself. On October 22nd, 2020, before I think any of the injections were available, or at the very, very beginning, actually, I think it's actually before, they made it available to the public. It's right there in black and white. I didn't do it. There it is. And one of the most fascinating side effects of the injection is death. What a fantastic, unusually odd thing to put in there. Safe and effective. I wonder what that means, safe and effective, but you go to the FDA and it says death as one of them. So I don't know. I'm having a hard time figuring out why death is safe and effective. Well, how is death safe? But it's okay, because Bill Gates finally admitted that at least this is what this article is saying, that the injections don't work as they should. They help with supposedly reducing health problems, but they don't really block transmission or anything else. But you need to listen to him, not me. And even one of the gentlemen who supposedly helped identify and/or the founder of the HIV, he says that the injections are creating the variants. So please go look into this as well. And the end result for those who take it will have an antibody dependent enhancement. So I'm not a scientist. I don't give medical advice. But this man is a scientist, and I think he is a doctor. And so you go research him, so see if this is valid. And the survival rate without being injected, what would that be? Well, here is the governor of Florida saying that he found some statistics on the CDC, and it looks really unusual. It says if you're uninjected and you're between 0 and basically 49 years old, it's a 99.98% chance of survival, meaning you don't need interventions, you don't need any injection, you're going to recover. And so people say, well, a lot of people out there don't like Governor DeSantis for whatever reason, and a lot do. But if you want something more official, you could always go to here's an example of it. I apologize for the quality of the picture, but this is from them. where it shows the same thing again. Because some people say, I don't trust tweets, I don't trust this man, but what about the source, right? So here's the source. Now, completely separate from all that, there's a man who said something about, this is just a little slide that everybody can go look at themselves on their own time. But there's some ideas about communism being part of this whole process. So if those people who believe in that, I think there is a connection to it. Obviously, you can look at this chart in your own time. And so, can you transmit COVID-19 when injected? So here is the CDC director saying it doesn't. Okay. So you can receive the injections, two shots, 3 shots, 4 shots, 5 shots, and then the annual booster, which is coming. So for those who are in the middle of getting the injections, expect, I would say, a minimum of 4 shots minimum, and you may have to take a fifth to a sixth. I heard it can go up to 10 shots a year, but I don't know if that'll be very popular. A lot of people who took it, most people who took it thought that it would block transmission. Most people who took it thought it's for life. Most people who took it thought they wouldn't have to wear the face covering anymore. And most people who took it thought that they would have immunity for life and that they wouldn't be able to, and they're protected. It appears that that's not the case. So the CDC is a big player with deep pockets. Now there's this website. It's called Project Veritas. So they did some sort of thing where they did. I guess I'm assuming it's undercover work or something, or they recorded. I don't know, but I would go to their website and check it out. But it was interesting in this video that there's a journalist from some sort of like I think it's from a Fox station saying, yeah, every commercial now is about COVID. How does that work? Who buys the space? Well, we're in a dying business, and they need the money, and who's showing up with the money, right? How much money are they spending to do that, though? And it's a ridiculous amount of money. Yeah, well, they're spending money. They're spending money because they can. What? Who? The CDC? No, yeah, they can. They are without. They're in the pocket. They're there. Now, this particular part isn't as clear, but if you go watch the video, you'll understand. The whole context will be cleared up. I don't want to make a mistake and make a false, I'm not making a claim. I'm just pointing out that this video gave me the impression that they've got, an apparently near unlimited funds to bombard the airwaves with their message. Meanwhile, this message I've never seen on the airwaves at all, where if you take the injection, whether it's the first, second, third, or fourth, and possibly fifth and sixth, that death is a side effect. So again, is it safe and effective? I don't know. You decide. So let's look at their products. Here's one of them. It's the Moderna injection. Here's their box. And if you look at the box, it says right below, it says for use under emergency use authorization. So if it's emergency use, that means it didn't go through the normal hoops, the normal rigor of what it would take to authorize it, because we didn't have time, right? It's an emergency. So we don't really know. I've never been able to find any long-term data on this because it's brand new. And I think the first product this company has ever made in the history of this company and is the mRNA injection. So it's a new technology. It's the only product they've ever done, and it's all under the emergency use, and it's all experimental. So you're in a clinical trial, from what I'm understanding. But it even says it on the box. It doesn't say fully approved, 5-10 years of rigor and all this stuff. It's just they whipped it up in under a year, and let's see how it goes. And so I was curious. I said, let's take a closer look. Here is an insert that I got from the pharmacy concerning that. So here it is. There's the insert. Now it's interesting because I opened it up completely. It's entirely blank, other than those two little rectangles there, which I find fascinating. That here the FDA is presenting all the possible outcomes, safe and effective, but the actual insert from the box itself, and I saw it myself, and received it myself in my hand, and that's it. So there seems to be unusual discrepancy here that it's blank for me, the person, if I were to take it, if I want to know what the potential issues are, if any. There may not be any, but it's blank. But the FDA has a different point of view. So I think what the FDA should do, I don't give advice, legal advice, medical advice, but if I was an employee, I would love to pick up the phone and coordinate with the CDC so that it's not mix and match inaccuracy or basically dropping the ball. This is what I would call dropping the ball in the business world. But if you want to know a little bit more, there's the University of Pennsylvania. They can give you some clarity on the adverse effects of the messenger RNA injections. So that's for those people who are interested. And who is behind the mRNA technology? Well, here's the man who supposedly invented it, I don't know if it's a doctor, Robert Malone. Here's a picture of the gentleman. He is an MD, so my mistake. This is his actual website. So this gentleman, you want to, don't take my word for it. Go to this man himself. He can help you understand more about the technology, if he's okay with it or not. I think he's not okay with it at all, in the sense that he doesn't, I heard a video that he said that he disagrees with the use in the way it's being administered currently. So I don't know if he would use it under different circumstances. That's something I would recommend the listener to go investigate yourself about this man, Dr. Malone, Robert Malone. So on his website, he explains how it was invented and so on and so forth. And of course, today we're dealing with a lot of people around the world who are dealing with the third shot. Well, if I go to clinicaltrials.gov, I can, maybe I can get more insight about what's happening. So I look at this particular trial here, and I scroll down, and this is what I found here. It's an optional sub-study. It's basically it's concerning the optional third injection. But what I found most interesting about it is that the study is going to be completed on this month and 10 days from now next year. So I find it strange that we're getting the third one, but this clinical trial isn't even completed yet. So, but I think what's happening is because it's an emergency, they don't want to take a chance. They want to save lives and so on and so forth. They're going to go ahead with the injection push. And with this injection push, you're going to be possibly getting a personalized cancer injection. And the reason why I'm saying that is not because I came up with it, because I am not a doctor. I am only looking at the news. And they say here, don't panic if you see a lump on your armpit after the injection. So usually a lump for most people like myself, a regular street person, if you get a lump, it's usually not a good. It's from what I know, it's never good. And most of the time you have to be worried if it's cancerous or not. So it's something to really to take into consideration if you choose to take it. And again, it's just strange that I wasn't able to find this anywhere in the mainstream news. Just can't figure it out. But there it is. Here are all these symptoms, adverse events that the FDA knew about on October 22nd last year. So really strange. So what about AstraZeneca? So this particular shot, they want to get full approval, right? Well, let's take a look at the clinical trials, and we'll notice it's the same thing again. Here's AstraZeneca. And if you scroll down to the thing, into the trial information, you see that the study completion date is February 14th, 2023. So yet we're all getting, it's available to everybody on Earth, the third shot. So I don't understand why we're getting it. I guess the whole world's in a clinical trial. I guess that's, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a scientist, right? But it just sort of, it's a possibility that everybody who's taken it is in a clinical trial. It's just that you're not actually in that particular study. So, and then of course they're looking to get full approval, right? So that's on the table. Again, it ends on February 14th, 2023. So we're November 12th today, 2021. So it's just, again, it's just a very strange, unusual set of events and information there. Let's take a look at the Janssen's, or people call it the J&J injection. Under emergency use authorization, it's not, approved. So I guess it's under the, it's experimental. So here again is the study, and Janssen's is there. Here's a study again on clinicaltrials.gov. The clinicaltrials.gov is not some guy in a basement on a blog. This is, eating, his ninth pizza slice. Here's the corporation's name. Here's their estimated study to be completed, and it's January 2nd, 2023. Now there are many other trials that are out there, so I would invite everybody to go look this up themselves. And even the CDC says that the benefits of the J&J injection outweigh the risks of rare neurological disorders. Interesting how, for me, death is the big one, right? Safe and effective, and death. So it's just an unusual combination. So what about Pfizer? Well, the World Health Organization approves emergency use, of course, and there it is. And there it is. And of course, here's one of the trials that they've done. Here it is again. And study completion is May 2nd, 2023, but the primary is November 2nd. That's like 10 days ago. I don't know. It's just a very unusual combination of data. As a side note and a connection point to the solar cult, here is the card I would use to get the free vaccine. I'm here in Quebec, Canada. So it's known in French, it's called the Sun card. It's your Medicare card. And on the card, it's the sun. And most people who've lived in the last 40 years will have seen this card exactly like this. So it's all connected. It's a solar cult. I'm not going to go into detail about that because it's going to be a separate presentation. And the face coverings, are they safe? Well, here's an article saying that a group of parents sent their kids' face coverings to a lab for analysis. Here's what they found. And also that the CDC to reverse indoor face covering policy, saying that people who have been injected need to wear the face coverings no matter what. So most people, when they took the first injections, they said, "Oh, okay, I don't have to wear the face covering anymore." But it looks like it was reversed. And there are some issues with recalls of the face coverings, right? Because they were finding in certain specific batches or from specific locations. Everybody can go look this up themselves, but it seems to be connected with graphene, and graphene is like a relative of lead. And again, I'm not a metallurgist or anything like that, but I did a quick Google search, and it's just interesting that some of the real face coverings were containing graphene before the recall. So you have to be aware of these things. Also for children. So there was a problem, so the government stopped it. And then, of course, what is the effectiveness of the face covering, right? There's different trials and different information out there that people can look at to see if it helps them come to a clearer understanding of what's going on. And in this particular study, it says the conclusions, the recommendations to wear these coverings to supplement other public health measures did not reduce the infection rate of SARS-CoV-2 amongst wearers by more than 50%. So you have to understand all this information is there to help you understand what it is. It's by the sailing foundations. And here's another Danish study saying that the coverings are not effective. I'm not doing this, but here's some of the information you can look up yourself. So here's another website that says that the NIH director admits that the school covering mandate are not based on the data of COVID-19's effect on children. But it's science, right? Because it's science. Now, unfortunately, this gentleman wore outside and he got a big burn. So this is the new normal. If you wear the face covering 7 days a week, 24/7, that's the new normal. He was so used to it and didn't pay attention that he unfortunately got a sunburn. And there's more than one recall of these face coverings. How about pregnant women? Is it safe? Well, of course, the CDC is going to tell you it's safe. That's their point of view. And so here is examples of their point of view. But unfortunately, there seems to be an impact that was unmentioned and undiscussed until after the fact, that it seems to impact menstrual cycles in some women. I don't know what the percentage is, and I don't know what all the symptoms are, but it seems to exist. So it's up for you to decide and do your own homework. How about the hand sanitizers? Well, here in Canada, I'm sure there's possibly similar stories in the United States Incorporated and all the other corporate nations of the world. But here in Canada, they recalled 18 or more different brands. And here's the FDA's list of 149 products that are being recalled. Here's another one strange, the Washington Post, 130 hand sanitizers that may not work or are toxic. Wow. Good thing you knew about this real time and not just now, right? What about the test swabs? Here's one that I found, and I wanted to be as official as possible because I don't want to put some nonsense out here. I want to go straight to the source, or one of the core sources, the World Health Organization, right? You know, most people identify with this directly. And so this is a document that came out in May 2021. And if I go down into the document, there's a specific section that discusses the nasal swab. And here's a picture of the actual swab packaging. And if you look on the right, there's like a little two rectangles that says sterile EO. Sterile EO. So what's that EO? EO. So I kept going down the document because I want to be part of the solution. I want you and me and everybody else to be safe. I don't want to fight anybody. I don't want to be part of any misinformation. I don't want to make false claims. And I want to be on the right side of this for everybody's sake. And so I looked in the document and I found what this sterile EO. So it says ethylene oxide. So I wonder what that is. I've never heard of that. Let's see what the NIH National Cancer Institute has to say about ethylene oxide. So here's their official website. Here's ethylene oxide. And here's the part that I want to sort of point to. What is ethylene oxide? Well, the ability, this is one of they use it for all kinds of stuff, but here's the part that's interesting. The ability of ethylene oxide to damage DNA makes it an effective sterilizing agent, but also accounts for its cancer-causing activity. Which cancers are associated with exposure to ethylene oxide? Excuse me. Lymphoma and leukemia are the cancers most frequently reported to be associated with occupational exposure to ethylene oxide. Stomach and breast cancers may also be associated with ethylene oxide exposure. So let's test everybody, shall we? And if we're going to test everybody, whether you have symptoms or not. So here's an example. If someone has no symptoms at all, you're at home, you're worried, do you have COVID-19? And if you have no symptoms, no fever, no coughing, no nothing, no symptoms whatsoever, you can still get tested and find out if you're carrying the disease with no symptoms. and expose yourself to I don't know if all the swabs have ethylene oxide, but some do. So you could be exposing yourself every time you test yourself to lymphomas and stomach and breast cancer. So it's just something to just be aware of. And here's another example of getting tested for COVID-19, even if you're completely, have all your injections, right? So that's important, and because it's not a test, and even the inventor says so. And so I went and I found this gentleman. His name is Kerry Mullis. It's in the photo at the bottom, but basically he's in a presentation a couple years ago, or a year plus ago, and he's saying that the PCR is separate, and it's just a process that's used to make a whole lot of a whole lot of something out of something. So from what I understood is that it takes whatever's in your nasal cavity and it amplifies it. It grows. That's why they have cycles on the machine. They use the cycle amplification cycles. And I think Dr. Fauci said anything over 28 or 35, I think it was, I don't remember. He said over a certain amount of cycles, it's useless. The test is useless. But it doesn't really test. It just takes what's there and amplifies it. It doesn't actually tell you if you have. And like he says here, that's right. It doesn't tell you that you're sick. It just tells you that you have the thing you ended up with. So whatever you have in your nose, if you ever got a pneumonia, whatever it is, any kind of viral load, it'll find it, amplify it, and that's what it does. It amplifies. It doesn't confirm. It just amplifies so that you can detect it and then see if it's there. But wait, there's more. The CDC admits that the PCR test is ineffective and will no longer be used. Well, wait a minute. If it's being promoted, why would the CDC put out a statement on, I think it's July 21st this year, saying basically the CDC will withdraw the request to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, for emergency use authorization. And so why would they remove it? Like, what the whole pandemic is based on this test that they're withdrawing, but they don't, so for those people who want to know why, you can go look at this particular document and see for yourself. Here's some alternative articles here. The CDC seems to tacitly admit PCR tests can't differentiate between the COVID and the flu. Maybe that's the reason why they're withdrawing it, because it can't actually determine the difference because it doesn't test. It amplifies any kind of biological material that's on the swab for you as a courtesy, as a scientific fact. It amplifies it versus confirming and saying what it is. Here's another one, declares that the test must go immediately after George Soros and Bill Gates buy COVID-19 test manufacturer. Here's Forbes. People like, I want something real. I want a real article from a real source. Well, here's Forbes. And again, people will want more, but I did the best I could. But George Soros and Bill Gates backed consortium to buy UK maker of COVID tests for 41 million. So this is information that can help you. And also, what about the ingredients? So here's a list that I was able to find. This is not really an official, but it's just there to help you understand what some of the ingredients are. And it's important that you understand that there's a lot of stuff in here that I can't pronounce, and I don't know what it is, so I'm not going to pretend that I know. Here's another version of it. I got this from a more scientific source. And I found here in the middle one, I said, I looked on the Moderna side, it says SM102. I was like, wonder what that is. I'll just pick one ingredient out of the blue and just see what it is, just for fun. So here's just a sample. What is SM102? Well, SM102 is a synthetic. It's not natural, synthetic. So you can't go in the woods and find SM102. It's a synthetic aminolipid. Nanoparticles. Well, here is one of the corporations that manufactures it. And here's a safety data sheet according to the OSHA and HCS. So what is the trade name is SM102, but the identification part of this safety data sheet says this product is for research use, not for human or veterinary diagnostic or therapeutic purposes. It is the responsibility of the purchaser to determine suitability for other applications. And in the second part of it, this data safety data sheet, it says suspected of causing cancer. So there's a big boil down of the whole thing. If you get exposed to it, if something goes wrong, if you ever get in contact with it, this is what they recommend you do. And so this is all stuff I found interesting, and also for the toxicity and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but here's the information for those who want to know. And it's all coming from their sheet, not me, you know. So I'm just repeating from the source, from what appears to be a very credible source. So what is this disinformation all about? Like, I want to stay away from this disinformation, and so should you. Well, the U.S. government, and the U.S. is a corporation. It's a federal corporation. It's not a constitutional republic. It is a corporation. So the constitutional republic, unfortunately, was lost a long time ago. I think it was before 1787. But here's how they're going to help bridge the gap and stop misinformation. And you know what? I agree. I think misinformation should not be propagated anywhere because it creates problems. It doesn't help people. And so I agree with, in this particular case, I agree with the U.S. government. They should not, they should take strong steps to help do the right thing and try to prevent and block or educate, not really prevent and block, but just to educate those who are wanting to know how to stay away from stuff that doesn't make any sense, stuff that's totally ridiculous, and just stick with the facts and stick with the science. And so there's all kinds of documents that helps you do that. Now, are they actually doing that? Are they actually, preventing misinformation? That's not up for me to decide. That's up for you to decide, and for the U.S. incorporated government to decide, and how you interpret that information. And so they're going to have all kinds of specialized language to help you. And a lot of times when you look at this specialized language, it's not street talk. It's all kinds of medical, legal terminology that I'm not personally familiar or comfortable with because I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a professional. I'm not a virologist. But just to help you understand that there's incredible amounts of money put into this to help you understand that it is a complete different. It sounds like English, but it's a completely different language. It's like legalese. You go to the court, they have all. It sounds like English, but they're saying different things to each other. Some words mean something completely different in the street than in a courtroom. It's the same thing in the medical world. And here's some documentation in Canada that if you come across somebody who has not been injected, here's how you sort of guide them towards it or help them reconsider. So they give you tips and tricks of how to talk to people who don't understand or don't want to be injected. And so this is how they're fighting misinformation using these documents and this kind of material. But I suspect a lot of it really comes from the Rockefeller Foundation. I mean, when you put $13 million, if you had $13.5 million in your bank account, it was wire transferred, taxes have been paid, it's clear and free. There's no dirty money, no blood money, nothing. If someone deposited clean $13.5 million, what could you do with that $13 million if you want to get a message out about you or your products or a message that you want to say? You could do a lot with $13 million. That's a microscopic drop in the bucket, $13 million. And here in the Corporation of Canada, there's an article saying that the military leaders saw the pandemic as a unique opportunity to test propaganda techniques on the Canadians. So this is what the military was saying. Here's the gentleman who is endorsing and creating a major energetic force in this direction. So he is part of this process. So you can look him up as well. I forget his name, but he's okay with this. And even the intelligence community in the Corporation of Canada has noticed that there might be a little bit of a tickle there. It might be a little bit of a problem. And so here they're even willing to admit it, that it was it was disruptive. This whole thing was very disruptive. So they're part of, they're part of this process. Now, we just yesterday was Remembrance Day in Canada and Veterans Day in the States, and I have family in both Canadian and U.S. military background, and I always extend my respect to all men and women in uniform who choose to serve us all. And if you signed up for the right reasons and your heart's in the right place, then I'm with you, right? So that's like a no-brainer. But I just wanted to point that out. It's very important to me that people understand that, because I know that there's a great honor if you go and sign up to serve, because you're risking your life when you sign up, right? You're that man or woman is risking their lives so that we're safe. So I want to extend my respects to all the men and women who serve, who have fallen in combat, knowing full well that the whole story is not about, just protecting. There's a much deeper story, but I'm focusing on the men and women who work from the heart, who operate from the heart, and did it for the right reasons. So thank you, and I salute you all, and you have my respect. So now let's take a look at a few examples, shall we, of this, could be possibly interpreted as misinformation. Alberta babies being born to unconscious, unvaccinated, uninjected moms, and it's worrying Calgary obstetricians. So what I find fascinating about this is that I've never heard of unconscious, uninjected women giving birth uh, to babies, right? Because they're uninjected. Like, what happens? How come it's an issue now and it hasn't been for the last tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years that humanity has been on Earth? Now, all of a sudden, on October 8th, 2021, now if you're uninjected, it's a serious, serious risk that Alberta babies are being born. And then, of course, the mothers are all unconscious, right? So I don't know how to play into that, but that's a very confusing, scary, thing that's being put out there. So I would invite the person who looks at this to say, is this straightforward? Does this make sense? To me it doesn't, but I'm not the one who's listening to this presentation. You are, and you know better. You know better than me. I think there's something wrong with this. Um, Also, here's something else I find interesting, that natural immunity doesn't replace the injections. So if you have natural immunity, it's really not that great. And so then the question I says, I'm in my 40s, so how did I make it in my 40s without having injections throughout my entire life for any kind of coronavirus? But this is a specific one. It's COVID-19. I've unfortunately had colds throughout my life, and so I must have been really lucky to have survived every cold for 40 plus years without being injected for it. It's a miracle of God that I survived it based on this article. So I just trying to figure out why it would be worded that way and presented that way. If I look at a Israeli study here that talks about natural immunity versus people who have been injected, the immunity from those who are injected. Not to go through the whole thing, but I went to the last page and I looked at the conclusion and I said, interesting. This study demonstrated that natural immunity confers longer lasting and stronger protection against infection and symptomatic cases of hospitalization caused by the Delta variant, excuse me, compared to this long sequence of numbers and letters of the two-dose injection induced immunity. So I don't know why the Israeli study is saying that, but that's their claim in this particular study, which I found a contradiction to what's in the news, right? And what's in the news is that your natural immunity just doesn't make the cut. And if you don't have these injections, you're in deep trouble. So if you're 60 or 70 years old, if you're 20 or 15, whatever, that means that it's a miracle that you made it to this stage without injections, because you technically you could have not made it. So, but here it's saying the opposite, saying natural immunity is strong, lasts longer, and is stronger protection against infection, which, so me, because I survived all the colds and a couple of flus in my life, it feels more correct to look at this, but it's just my gut feeling. It's just my personal interpretation. I think natural immunity carries carries the win here. But you know what? Forget everything. Wow, forget everything I said. I found the truth. It's Maine lobster. That's who's behind COVID-19. It's a Maine lobster. Here it is. I think this is NBC. China linked disinformation campaign blames COVID on Maine lobsters. Now this is like, comic relief. I like this guy. He's wearing his mask, his face covering below his nose, and he's part of the explanation that COVID comes from Maine lobsters. And so if I had known that Maine lobsters was really the source of COVID-19, I would have changed everything in my life and oriented around Maine lobsters. But I don't think it's Maine lobsters, but there it is. It's floating around the internet. Thank God I'm not part of any of this nonsense of spreading nonsense stuff out there. And of course they're going to have a misinformation campaign to block. Nobody in their right mind in the government would say Maine lobsters are the reason for this whole thing. And they wouldn't create a task force and action-oriented steering committees and drop billions and billions in advertising to say it's Maine lobsters, right? So that's why they're doing this misinformation campaign, to stop nonsense like this, right? So I applaud the U.S. Corporate government. I applaud, the current administration for blocking Maine lobsters from becoming the false source of the COVID-19 pandemic. So good job. And but of course, we have to be careful. And and how about super deadly farts, right? Super deadly farts. So here's USA Today saying that we can cough and sneeze. That's why we have the face covering, supposedly to block droplets and to create a protection barrier, so it protects the individual wearing it and it protects everybody else. But but what if someone has a big problem downtown, and so this is what they're investigating. So this is what I think the U.S. government's been working tediously to try to stop nonsense like this. And you need the billions. You need the Bill and Melinda Gates to come in to block all this information about how the coronavirus can be spread through farts. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So I really want to thank the U.S. government for blocking this as well. But all this is tough to navigate. So it's hard. And it's so complex that even the entire military-industrial complex is stuck too. And I understand. I mean, here in the Associated Press, it says that the U.S. Intel doesn't expect to determine the origins of COVID-19. So, it's tough, right? And you got to just do it. You got to take the bull by the horns, and you got to go with your small budget, and you got to make it work. And so, but I think really the final conclusion from their point of view is we're just not going to know. We have no idea, and we're never going to find out. Here's Reuters as well. Not only the in-house, but even the spy agencies, they're stuck too. They don't know. They may never be able to identify the origin. So here's the thing about misinformation. If you can't find the origins, you've got to stop all the stories like Maine lobsters and COVID farts. And so they're stuck. So they're dealing with this. So I understand where they're coming from. And they told us to stay home and to not catch it and or not to spread it. But here's a news site that says the Courier Mail. If you're fully injected, it means you have all your injections against COVID. The next step to improve your immunity was to actually catch the virus. So how come they told us for a year plus, stay home, wear a face covering, get the injections, be careful, wash your hands everywhere you go, don't touch this, don't touch that, don't go see your family, don't go to weddings, don't go to funerals, cancel. and stay home, work from home, be home, and don't leave home. But now they're saying go out and get it. So, and here's another prestigious site called Nature, and they're saying if you have COVID, you'll probably make antibodies. So it's the best part of this science. This is the best part of the science. I love it. You'll probably make antibodies for a lifetime. Probably. That's just raw science right there. Raw. So changing the definition of the word injection. What's that all about? Well, the CDC quietly changed its guidance to say even the injected people should get tested, even if they've been exposed to COVID-19. So here's another website basically saying the same thing. Here's another one. This is definitely a left-leaning website. And so the CDC director may change the definition as boosters roll out. And here's another alternative website, and that the Congress made crucial change to the definition weeks before the actual pandemic. Very interesting information. Here's the one from the Miami Herald explaining something very similar. And so here, I think it's Merriam-Webster's. I should have put it in here, but it's just to help you, just to give some additional context. Here's what was the definition before they changed it in the dictionary, on the online dictionary. And here's what it is after. So it's just a very interesting. And the problem is it's not easy for the average person who works 9 to 5 to keep up with all these changes. That's why I'm here to help you avoid misinformation, to avoid going out and telling everybody it's Maine lobsters and all this other stuff, and show you how some of the changes that are legitimately happening. I know I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek, but this is, very important information to know before you make your decision, if you want to take it or not. And so what about our children or your children? Well, here's an article. It says the FDA panel member, we're never going to learn about how safe it is until we start giving it. So we have to. And I found that interesting. I don't know what the science is behind that, but what kind of protocols there were. I mean, if that was the case, then they must have done that for every other injection since the beginning of the technology. And I don't know if that's the case. I don't think so. But here's something official. People I want to bite hard on this. Here's the World Health Organization saying considerations regarding consent in children and adolescents between 6 and 17 years old. In the document itself, if you send your child to school, any public school anywhere in America, or possibly in Canada as well, at least in America, it appears to be the case, in the United States Incorporated, in Section 3 on page 3, an implied consent process, implied, right, by which parents are informed of imminent injection through social mobilization communication, sometimes including letters directly addressed to the parents. Subsequently, the physical presence of a child or adolescent with or without an accompanying parent at the session is considered to imply consent. So if your parent is not there, you send your child to school and you don't know about this document and you don't know about this, the school and the entire health system considers that you consented that your child be injected. I'm not saying this, the World Health Organization is. I'm not making a claim, they are making the claim. I am not a scientist, they're saying this is science. So, or they're using this material in conjunction with what they call their science. And of course, there's probably going to be some problems with that because not every parent knows this, and so they're going to send their child to school. And there seems to be some issues with that. Young people, children, receiving the injection, and the parents find out afterwards, and then they don't realize that it's implied consent. They gave consent by sending their child to school, whether they know about it or not. And of course, it continues. Even on Sesame Street, Elmo has a massive heart attack. So you're going to say, well, that's Photoshop, Jeffrey. You did that in your own free time. No, I didn't. Here's another one. Elmo's first heart attack, and on his chest, I got my COVID-19 injection. So it's now claiming that children can have a heart attack, maybe not necessarily related to the injection, but they seem to promote the idea that, because I've never heard of Elmo ever saying he's had a heart attack ever. I've never been with any nieces or nephews watching TV with them, if it's for young children. I've never heard of any kind of puppet show ever saying I had my first heart attack until now. But here's the sad story of a handsome young man, and my heart goes out to him. I'm very distressed seeing this because he's just the tip of the iceberg. His first meal in 4 days since coming out of a coma as a result of his mini heart attack. So thankful he's injected with all those sick people in this place. So no child should have a heart attack, and no parent would ever want their child to have a heart attack, and no medical doctor that I've ever met would want a child to have a heart attack. But supposedly it's safe and effective. And so here's an example of a U.S. Army outfit that's possibly doing this at a school, because I'm not in the tent. I'm not seeing what they're doing. They could be handing out brownies. Who knows? So the military is possibly, the U.S. military is possibly involved with injecting children at school with or without consent. It's just something to keep in mind, that the military is part of that process too. And, when it comes to children, it's very, very heartbreaking. You want children to grow up and be successful and enjoy life and get the most out of it. But here is a document called Related Biological Products Advisory Committee meeting on October 26, 2021. It's the FDA briefing document. Basically, that's what it is. And for children, for the injection from Pfizer, in children from 5 to 11. And in this injection, in this document, it seems to mention the portion here to provide an injection with an improved stability profile. The Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 injection for use in children 5 to 11 of age uses tromethamine, or tris. It's a buffer of the phosphate buffered saline. So basically, you can just read this. Basically, they included in the injection to probably, hopefully reduce or help prevent or help lower the chance. I'm not the scientist. You read the document, you can find out yourself. They added this in there. I didn't write this, the FDA did. I didn't add the chemical, they did. And again, I don't understand why the FDA didn't spend the amount of money that the CDC did to help promote back in October 22nd that you can have a dozen or more different kinds of adverse events, including, even though it's safe and effective, it's called death. So death is one of them. Science-based medicine. Here's another article I found. It could possibly lead to Alzheimer's. What about informed consent? What is informed consent? Well, you can get the FDA version of it, so that's official. So you don't feel I'm not misguiding or misdirecting anybody, but this is where you can get it from the horse's mouth. Or you can go on the internet and do a quick search, and it's just basically saying, yeah, permission is granted in the knowledge of the possible consequences, not just safe and effective. You got to go with the risks as well. Typically, that which is given by a patient to a doctor for treatment with full knowledge of the possible risks and benefits. So if they just say safe and effective, and there's huge lists of a big list of symptoms, that needs to be like full. Basically, if the doctor, I'm not a doctor, but if I was a regular person, I would say, well, wouldn't you want to tell me you could die from it? That would be part of, to me, that would be part of informed consent, but I'm not a lawyer. So, but that's how I would interpret it. And again, I got this, just as a reminder, I got this insert from the pharmacy. And so let's look and see what's informed consent is from their point of view, from the actual medicine itself. It's blank. So I don't know if informed consent is actually a legal, medical, statistical, mathematical, scientific possibility here. It just doesn't seem like it is. Here's a book that I came across, Murder by Injection, the story of the medical conspiracy against America. So I don't know, it's a completely separate topic, but it's just an interesting coincidence here. by Eustace Mulling. So those people who want to expand their understanding of what's going on or possibly what's going on, check out the book. But almost nobody really checks anything, and even fewer really want to know. So they will not really do well. And since that's the case, it's time for the biggest injection push in the entire history of the world. Again, it's ongoing, right, even to this day. So we have very famous, reputable people in the world of media and pop culture taking the injection. This is our shot, right? And here's in Canadian. Here's Ryan Reynolds. I really enjoyed Deadpool, even though I don't necessarily agree with his take on this, but I appreciate his talent. But there's a big campaign, and he decided to choose to take this point of view. Even the Dalai Lama is taking it. So I wonder if he knows that one of the side effects is death. And here's Arnold Schwarzenegger. Come with me if you want to live. I think that's what he said. And so there it is. Here's Kate. Here's William. Here's Kamala. Here's Dolly. There's Dolly. And here's Elvis. So it's a long-standing tradition. You better take your shot. Safe and effective. Safe and effective. So this is about health and protecting the world. 33 billion, huh? 33.5 billion. And if you don't like it, they don't care. It's time to face eternal punishment. It's called the social credit system. So if you don't get your injection, you will face consequences from your employer. It's a punishment system. That's what the social credit system is. This is all about the social credit system. If you don't do as you're told, you're punished. It doesn't matter if it's a right, your rights are violated or not, or if it's correct or scientifically accurate. It doesn't matter. It's about punishment. And punishment is the foundation of the social credit system. All right. So that's why it's crazy. Nobody knows what's going on. It's confusing. It's debate, but the punishment's clear. Nobody's debating that the punishment's there. And if those people who've taken the injection feel like I haven't been punished, well, if you've been wearing a face covering and you took your second and third injection and you haven't felt any punishment yet by staying home for weeks or months at a time, not seeing your family and friends, then you need to rethink what you consider as punishment. But this is the gateway to the social credit system that is already rolled out in this place called China. And I've been talking about the social credit system long before the majority of the people out there. So now you're probably wondering, where does all this tech come from for the social credit system? Well, this injection passport that people are getting. Here it is. Passports are coming. What can you learn from the passport rollouts? Well, one of the corporations that's behind it that allows the technology to work to see if you are valid, authentically injected or not is called Data Card Group. So I invite everybody to go look that up. It's also known as Entrust Corporation. And one of the really interesting sources of research that I found explaining the source of this technology comes from a woman named Amazing Polly, or that's her internet name. She did a really interesting expose on where the technology comes from a corporate background, not a theoretical background, a corporate background. So if you want to know who owns the land that you're about to buy, who owns the company that you're about to buy, you got to do a corporate search to see who's the owner and make sure that there's no breach in the chain of custody, so that when you do buy the car, you do buy the land, you do buy the boat, you buy the home, the building, the hotel, you're not making a mistake, and then you can lose because you don't know who really owned it, and so you didn't buy it correctly, you didn't do the paperwork right. So she is really, really good. I want to personally thank Amazing Polly for her tireless work on informing those who want to know. And of course, the government of Canada, they're exploring biodigital convergence, which includes, it's not necessarily covering the injections, but it's more about the social credit system and how you can be rated and graded. And so Canada is going to be a world leader in the Western world for the social credit system. And here's just a sample of what they're talking about. You can go look at this document. Some really interesting information. I don't agree with the overwhelming majority of it, but it's there for those who want to know. And it's not, again, some guy eating a bear claw in the basement. It's the government of Canada. And if you think that it's going to end with injections, it's actually going to continue with injection technology, mRNA technology grown in food. Now, the USDA in the United States is going to be using nanotechnology, which is basically a very similar, compatible technology with mRNA. And so there's a possibility that they're going to be growing food with the injection technology in the foods. You don't have to take the needle anymore.
Wow.
And if you want to know more, of course, you can do 10 secret. You can go look up this little nugget here. Uh, 10 secret things you didn't know about nano entities. So you'll see how it's all playing out and how injection technology can show up everywhere in your life. You know, the water that comes out of your tap, possibly, but for sure the food that you're going to be eating down the road. And meanwhile, at all these overwhelmed hospitals all over North America and most likely possibly around the world, that's what the news is saying. The doctors are dancing. There's dancing doctors, right? So here's a doctor dance. The doctors dance wearing a PPE kit. I don't know what PPE stands for. I'm assuming it's a protection device, that big suit that they're in for COVID-19. Here's 5 videos of dancing nurses go viral in celebration of recovered COVID. No, so that's all right. If someone's recovering and they want to dance, I'm cool. And I do value the men and women who serve on the front line to protect lives, to save lives. I've had family members who are nurses, so I want to be sensitive to them because it's a big stress, right? To have to go in and you have to help other people who are sick, and you don't know if you're going to get sick. You don't know if you can catch it and die. So it's very, very stressful. So I want to thank anybody who's on the front line in any unit, on any floor, in any hospital, any clinic everywhere who's doing the right thing for the right reason. But I don't know if dancing or doing the Corona dance when the severity of the situation is so severe is really the appropriate thing. Like, to me, this is not doctorly behavior, but they felt it was a good idea, and they thought it would be sort of cool to, because for a while most of the emergency rooms were empty. You know, that's a counterclaim that I've heard. And so they had the time to practice dancing. Like, you know, when you go see a show and you pay $100 to see a show, you got to see how they're choreographed. And it takes time to choreograph 10, 15, 20 people to dance all in the same time at the same way. It takes sometimes weeks or months of practice to get it right. So these doctors had time. They knew what they were doing, and they had the time to choreograph and do a lot of dancing. And there are definitely dancers here. They are dancers. Here, they had a lot of time in this hospital. It's unbelievable. Here's another one where they weren't busy at all, because if I had a family member that went to this hospital and I were to find out that they were dancing and they weren't taking care of my loved one, I would take action, right? So they must have been empty to do this, because they would be open to lawsuits. Here's another dancer, right? So he's on top of the game. He's on top. He knows what he's doing. So again, they all have the time. They're paid a very good salary. They have excellent pensions. I've heard of nurses making up to $120 an hour. So imagine these nurses, let's say they're making $60 an hour. That's pretty good. So I would love to have a job I could get paid $40 to $120 an hour to dance. That would be pretty cool. So people say, well, you just pick pictures of doctors dancing and you don't know what you're talking about. Of course, I looked it up. Here's a picture of doctors that were dancing for Christmas. So it's not Christmas dancing. This one is the Christmas dancing. These aren't. This is during the COVID, okay? Saying that whoever recovered, we're going to spend hours and hours and hours, days and days, weeks and weeks to choreograph all these dance units outside, inside, in the hallways, in the rooms. in the operating rooms. We'll take equipment, hospital equipment, and make ourselves look strange, and we'll dance and dance and dance at $60+ an hour. If you're a new nurse, it's probably less, right? Maybe $20 or $30 an hour. But even then, if you're paid $30 an hour to dance during a pandemic, does that make sense to you? To me, it doesn't. So the only reason why I sort of can see them doing this is because there was nobody in the hospital at the time, and they had that emptiness day and after day, and so they had the time. Because I used to be a manager, I've hired people, I've overseen hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of employees through their probation period, and I never would have tolerated this for 1 second personally, never. So I can only imagine the hardcore bosses out there. They're much more severe than me. So they must have a different approach in the hospital system. So here's a cardiologist who's telling the uninjected, "I won't cry at your funeral." And so here's a claim. I'm not making this claim, but it says that he unfortunately passed away after his third injection, only 2 weeks later. So if that's the case, it's very sad, and it's very disappointing that someone who takes an oath to protect life and to do no harm would make a public statement like that. Very, very, very distressing. It really shatters the trust that we all should have in the system that we may no longer have after all this is over. Again, all this is really is a cover to launch the social credit system. And so, but that's for another presentation. And just as a final parting note, here's an example of a technology that uh, with injections, you can actually have the data of your body's movement when you get up, when you sleep, when you're eating, when you're, intimacy, all this stuff. It's all recorded, and you can use it to create cryptocurrency, create money. And it's really fascinating that most people don't know about. It's Microsoft, right? And it's all connected to carbon credits and the United Nations sustainability goals. Uh, this could replace the dollar, your carbon credit allowance. So they have carbon credit cards that you can only buy a certain amount of food, certain amount of